All right, it is 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Joshua, the other folks that have joined, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Like I said, this is the first session we're doing, so welcome to the Pioneering Batch. Now, today's session is entirely on social selling. It's what I spend a lot of my time doing in terms of training, consulting organizations. So today I thought I'd share a little bit more in terms of what have been my learnings and what is the framework that I've created that has helped executives and business development professionals really help grow their pipeline and their business. So like I said, questions are welcome. But in the meantime, I'm just going to kick us off and go through. All right. Hey, Sam. Welcome. So as I mentioned, I'll start off by sharing a quick framework that I've used to really kickstart social selling initiatives. And I call it the 3 C's. So content, conversation, and conversion. Now, content, as you can imagine, is the type of information you are producing and sharing on social and your other online channels. Now, the main goal of your content should really be to strike a conversation with your target audience. So you want to see people engaging, you want to see people commenting and really asking questions. That should be the main driver of your content. Is really sparking conversations and then being that guide. From there, you want to identify who, are, checking your content, who's engaging with it, and then you want to send them a message privately, and that'll kickstart the conversion process. Because the whole point of social selling is we want to take it from an online relationship to an offline. So offline meaning, catching up for coffee or a face-to-face meeting, or if they're overseas, a face-to-face video call. Something that can actually facilitate a sale, because the front end, the content and the conversation doesn't really facilitate a sale, or it shouldn't at that point. It should help guide your prospect towards that offline meeting. That's where you really close the sale. So that is my 3C framework for social selling in a nutshell. But like I said, I want to hear from you guys. Hit me up in the comments in terms of what are the questions you have around social selling, what are the challenges you're facing, and even the framework that I mentioned just now, the content, conversation, and conversion. Where do you find the biggest gaps or challenges in your current role? So let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rambling on until, yeah. So I want to hear from you guys. Hit me up with your comments, questions. All right, so maybe I'll start in terms of the first C, which is creating content. A lot of times people ask me, how do I go about creating content that is relevant to my audience and is also going to help me close sales, essentially? So I always develop the bulk of my content based on questions my audience is having. So for example, I do a lot of online polls. You'll see me. I'll ask questions like, what is your biggest challenge around blank? And then have people, comment, and then I'll respond to that. And if there's enough kind of desire or demand for that topic, I'll go ahead and produce some kind of video, an article, and so on. Now, the same applies to my offline conversations. So I have a lot of meetings with prospects, people in the community. And so I'm able to identify what are the common challenges that they're talking about on a regular basis, and then how can my content just serve as a basis to answering those questions. Because at the end of the day, a lot of your B2B customers go to social media, they go to online channels because they're really looking for solutions or answers to their burning questions. And if you can be the person who is answering those questions on a regular basis, then you by default are building your trustworthiness and credibility among the audience. So keep that in mind whenever you are developing your content. It should essentially be something that answers your prospects or clients' burning questions. That's usually the most powerful. The format is really irrelevant at this point. The first step is really understanding your audience. So what are the common challenges they're having? Your content should just be a form in which to address those challenges. And then the format you could mix and match. So find out which format works best for different platforms. So for example, LinkedIn, you can see right now that some of the most popular, most engaging posts are generally native videos. So native videos are essentially you publishing videos directly onto the site, onto LinkedIn in this case, rather than publishing a link to, say, a Vimeo or a YouTube video. Now, the reason for that is because LinkedIn and other platforms, they want you to stay on the platform as long as possible. So native videos help do that because you don't have to actually leave LinkedIn to view the video. So that's one. Another format I've seen that's worked quite well is text-only posts. So the same concept is that you're able to keep the audience on LinkedIn. So text-only posts I've seen work quite good in terms of, sharing more in-depth insights, answering questions, or even sharing simple stories. So a story that you have with a recent, customer or prospect, share that story. What were your key takeaways? And then end it with a call to action. So encourage people to, ask questions or comment. The last one I've seen is the new, I guess I call it the presentation feature. So you can add slides or PDFs. This works really well because what you're doing is you're taking a lot of information and you're putting it in a format that's easy to scan. Because the issue I've seen a lot of organizations make recently is that they try to pump all this information. They're pumping a whole lot in this infographic and publishing it on LinkedIn. Now you got to remember that post is really small. And if you're on a phone like this size, this is relatively small, even if your phone is larger, it's only going to be a very small image. So I always advocate less text if you're going to post an image on LinkedIn or other platforms. So less text and more vivid visuals. So bright colors, photos of people tend to work well, but not just pumping a whole bunch of text in there. One, it's going to be very difficult for people to stop, scan, and getting information from it. And two, it's really difficult to read. Now you may be able to double tap on it and open it and see the information. But if that's the case, I would argue that you put it in either a presentation form only in terms of the uploading of the PDF, or you just have an external link and you take them to another site which they can view on a larger format rather than kind of pumping in all of that information just in one slide, just in one image, I mean. What else? What other questions you have? Sam, what are your questions around content? You're a writer. What are some of the burning questions that you face when it comes to content creation, either for your own business or for clients? So Joshua asks a very good question. He says, "Hey Joe, how do you decide which platform to do social selling in?" So as I mentioned before, the whole strategy really boils down to understanding your audience. So once you understand your audience, you want to ask them a question. So for example, if you're speaking with prospects or clients on a regular basis and you have a good relationship, then you can ask them and say, "Hey, which platforms do you tend to spend more time on? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Instagram? Where do you spend most of your time?" So there's that. That's usually the best source, is speaking directly to either your prospects or your clients, or even speaking with your sales and customer service teams, because they have really close ties with your customers. They're speaking with them on a regular basis, and they can often give you some insights. So that's one. The other thing you could do is on your website, you can ask, how did you find us? So for example, if you have a drop down, your name, title, company, and then a drop down, how did you hear about us? So LinkedIn, Facebook, our newsletter, referral, et cetera, et cetera. That can give you an additional source of information in terms of where your customers are actually spending their time. That's a second. The third is looking at your analytics. So if you look at your website traffic in Google Analytics, you can see which channels are driving traffic to your specific website. So for example, is it social? Is it referrals? Referrals, you can see even publications if it's linked. So for example, if I put out a Forbes article and there's a hyperlink to my website, I can see how much traffic is coming from that particular channel. So it helps broaden my view to not only social, but even like, what are the media channels? What are the blogs that I need to be part of in order to reach my audience? So those are the top three. Anything outside of that, there's a lot of online research. So We Are Social does obviously a lot in terms of audience demographics and things like that. But I would say start with speaking with your audience first to really understand what are the channels they're on, either speaking to them directly or through that drop down on your Contact Us page, or looking at your Google Analytics to find out where the traffic is coming from. Not only where the traffic is coming from, but where they're converting. If you have an online or e-commerce, you can see, okay, if they're coming from LinkedIn, are they actually taking some kind of action? So they are purchasing an item, they're contacting us, they're signing up for our newsletter. These are stronger indicators in terms of the right channels. I hope that answered the question. Let me know if not, and I'm happy to expand upon that. Otherwise, Sam says, "I was wondering, do you think it'd be worth hiring a marketing or salesperson as a freelancer so you could focus on client work?" Good question. So for me, when I started in my business, I didn't really have a sales and marketing person. I mean, as the founder, I'm technically doing, sales, marketing, finance, everything under the sun, execution, strategy. But what I found is, going back to the framework in which I mentioned, by creating enough relevant content, by showcasing your expertise, you can essentially spark those conversations, get that interest coming to you. So get leads coming to you rather than you going out to them. Because I don't think it's necessary to hire a marketing and salesperson if you can take the time to either shoot a short video or develop a short article, something that really showcases your expertise. Going back to what I was saying, that hopefully answers your audience's questions. I think if you do that on a consistent basis, you no longer really need sales and marketing, at least in the traditional sense. I can tell you for this because that's how I built my business. I don't have any salespeople. I haven't really done any marketing. And I've been fortunate to have, a very healthy pipeline of clients simply because I'm constantly producing relevant content for them. Well, I hope it's relevant. I hope it's valuable. So, yes, it's not necessary to hire a marketing salesperson. But even I think showcasing some of your client work. Now, it's not always possible to talk about case studies because a lot of times you have to get approval from the company and so on. But you can always anonymize it. So, for example, if you worked with Coca-Cola, you could say a Fortune 500 F&B company, and I produced this piece of content, and here was the results. So that's one way in which you can create content that's already relevant to what you're currently doing. The other is co-creating content. So that's what I do quite often as well. I mean, I produce a lot of original pieces, but I realized that it's helpful to reach out to the wider, your wider network. So I connect a lot of interviews with people that I think are experts in their field, or that I think can add value to the conversation, or even prospects and clients, because I want to give my clients opportunity to showcase their expertise as well. That's probably more important than showcasing mine. And if we're able to do it together, if we're able to put together a joint infographic or blog or video, whatever it is, that to me is more powerful than me producing it on my own. Because one, I want to essentially highlight my client, showcase their expertise. That is, like I said, more valuable to me because when I look at my business model, I look at customer retention more than I look at acquisition. Acquisition for me is something I don't do that aggressively, but something like customer retention and customer advocacy is what I really spend the bulk of my time on. And you can do that, like I said, by creating content with your client together. And if you have a decent sized network, if you're sharing it on your channels, then once again, it makes them look good. It makes them, builds their credibility and their profile as well, which a lot of the times they will very much appreciate. Let me know what other questions you have. But good questions, guys. Keep them coming. I think any freelancer should think of themselves as an entrepreneur rather than a freelancer. And Sam, check out Virginia. Josh asks, is there a better, more quantitative way to get market sizing beyond anecdotal evidence with prospective customers if you're trying to capture a new market? You might not have much data past that you can use. So that's a good question. I think it's always helpful to gauge demand by doing mini pilots. So for example, if I am trying to expand into Europe and I don't know if there's a demand for, let's say my training, let's say social selling training. I'm trying to expand into Europe. I don't know if there's a market there yet. There's not really any, information online that's going to tell me, the market size of social selling trainings in that region. I mean, I can do some quick search in terms of social selling training in quotation marks and then the country just to find out how many search results are coming up. But what I would do instead is I would run some kind of educational program. So let's say I'm doing a free webinar to start off with on social selling, and I'm only targeting it towards participants in Europe. That is one way for me to gauge demand. So for example, I can see just from an awareness point of view, how many people are willing to join the call or the webinar, whatever it is, from say Europe. That'll give you a good sense in terms of my immediate demand from my audience. And then you can funnel a bit deeper. So let's say that you have 1,000 people attend your free webinar or your free YouTube live, whatever it is, from Europe. The next step you could do is you could put them in your funnel and you can ask them to join your newsletter. And then you can, provide a monetary offer. So for example, you are doing a paid webinar now, or you're doing a paid event. How many of those 1,000 people that attended the free webinar are willing to actually pay for your information, to pay for your content? That'll give you another sense in terms of, does it have commercial value? Because there's a lot of people that will consume free content, and they're happy to do that. And it helps, like I said, from a first layer of understanding your market. But I think you need to go one step further and saying, okay, out of these 1,000 people, for example, how many of them are willing to pay for what I have? So even if you're doing, beta testing for a product or service, and you're offering a 20% discount to people who attended that, how many of those people that attended that free webinar are willing to pay for that, beta version of your product or service, or that, paid webinar, whatever it is that you are trying to charge for? Then you can see where the drop off in their conversion rate is. And obviously you want to expand that, but then it'll give you some ideas in terms of what is the initial demand from an awareness point of view. And then second, what is the commercial demand? If the commercial demand isn't high enough, then you should want to tweak the first thing and say, okay, am I getting the right audience to begin with? Do I have the right value proposition? Do I have the right offering? What do I need to fix here in order to improve that conversion rate? Because like I said, if ultimately you have 0 people, paying for it, it's very difficult to develop a new business unit or a new business offering with very little commercial demand. So I've tried to do that myself as well, just to find out, new topics. Do they resonate with the audience? Are people willing to pay for it? Sometimes, like this, they're more than welcome to join a free webinar. But when it comes down to a paid event or a paid webinar, there's a huge drop off. So I said, okay, maybe there's a gap in terms of what I'm trying to offer. Hope that makes sense. So Sam says, I published my first piece on LinkedIn this week and got good engagement and loads of comments, but mostly from people I know and not really the right audience. The next one will be more focused on my audience, but is it a good mix of personal and more targeted content? So I think it definitely doesn't hurt to get people you're already connected with engaging with your content. But I think it goes back to cultivating the right type of audience. So even for me, I started actually culling or reducing my number of connections, which sounds crazy. But I did that because I wanted to remove any connections that I felt I wasn't adding value to. So now a lot of my connections are more marketing, sales, and branding focused, because that's what I produce a lot of my content on, and that's where my business is developed. That's what my business offerings are. So I think the first step is really cultivating the right audience and the right connections. Because even if they are, say, your friends, or you've worked together, your colleagues, your former colleagues, if you have cultivated the right relationships up front, and they have a similar type of characteristics as your target audiences, your prospects, then there's no harm in them sharing or liking your content as well. Because if your first degree connections like it, and they have second degree connections that are similar to yours, that still benefits your business. But it always goes back to, do I have the right audience to begin with? If you don't, go through your connections. Before that, okay, first identify what your right audience is. So look at your current client portfolio. See what type of roles, what type of industries, what type of companies they're coming from. Then you can connect the dots and say, okay, for example, my audience could be marketing directors at Fortune 500 companies in B2B space, which is the case. So anyone that falls outside of that, criteria, I'll have to seriously evaluate, do I want them to be in my network? Because if I'm not adding value to them, if I'm not creating focused, targeted content for them, it's not adding much value. And I don't care so much about the vanity numbers. I don't care how many connections I have. I care about the quality of connections. So really go about cultivating the right relationships. All right, gentlemen, we have about 5 minutes left. So let me know if you have any further questions. Like I said, I hope this has been helpful so far. If you know of anyone who might, benefit from today's session, feel free to share the link with them, with your team members, your clients, et cetera, et cetera. That would mean a lot to me. So thank you. So I'll try to go ahead and answer one more question before we wrap up today's session. So let's see. Oh, this is a good one. This is a good one. So it says, if you wish to start a social selling culture in your company, who would you rope in? Now, I do this a lot with organizations, and the first thing I do, because in most organizations, decisions come from top down. So the first people I usually try to get on board is the C-suite. So if the CEO, the CMO, they get excited, they have some understanding of what social selling is and how it can benefit the business, that's great, because it'll trickle down a lot of the times. Now, they don't have to be experts in social media or social selling. That's not really the point of the first exercise. The first exercise is really getting them familiar with what it is and how it can help the business. That's it. That's all they care about. So if you're able to educate them first, get their excitement, get their buy-in, then you can work, further down the chain of command. So their VPs, their directors, the managers. You need to get the top level, excited first, and then it will trickle down into the other departments, the other divisions. But from there, it's really setting the vision in terms of why social selling. So why social selling for the organization, and why social selling for the individual. Because if you don't answer both for each individual, they're not going to be excited. They're not going to take part in it. So why is it important to the company? I think that's what the C-suite and the senior executives will care about. I think once you go a little further down the ladder, what's in it for me, essentially? How is social selling going to help me? How is it going to help me get a raise? How is it going to help me get promoted? How is it going to help me in my career, what I want to do professionally? So have, that conversation and plan out, okay, how can social selling really help you? So it could be a series of workshops. It could be conversations you have with different team members, whatever it is, but you need to internally be the catalyst, the advocate first, saying, okay, look, I've done social selling. Here's what here's what it's done for me. My pipeline has grown. I've hit all my quotas, for example. I have all these new clients. I'm potentially getting So things like that, if they see your success, a lot of the times they'd be like, okay, well, why aren't I doing that? I want the same kind of success. I want the same kind of recognition, accomplishments. So you have to be almost like the guinea pig in the organization first. Get those results under your belt, and then share them with your team members, your colleagues. But more importantly, see how that can help them as well, because that's all they care about, is what's in it for me. If you can answer that question on a consistent basis with most of the team members, only then can you really start building a strong social selling culture. So that is right on time. Thank you so much for joining, Sam, Joshua, and everyone else on the call. Really appreciate your support. Like I said, if you enjoy this session, please feel free to share it with your colleagues, your peers, or anyone you think might find today's session helpful. Thank you so much, and we'll hopefully see you again.